Okay, so what if the key to saving the world wasn't some grand political plan, but a really intense personal commitment to just being serious? In this explainer, we're going to dive into a pretty wild 1973 speech that lays out this exact philosophy. A way of life where every single moment has to be lived with this total, all-encompassing intensity. So, this was the question, the one he kept asking his inner circle. And look, this wasn't just some casual, how's it going kind of thing. No. This was a constant challenge. It was the standard they were meant to use to measure, well, every single moment of their lives. So what does this seriousness even mean? I mean, what does it actually demand of you? Well, according to the source, we're talking about something that goes way beyond just, focusing on a task. It was a call for a complete and total reorientation of your entire being.
Okay, so the speech kicks off by pointing out what it sees as a huge problem with the modern world. Basically, that we're all living with thousands of different competing standards, right? Everyone has their own personal scale for what's right and what's wrong. And the argument goes, this is a surefire recipe for chaos and conflict.
And this is where the speech lays out a really stark choice. It's like you have two paths. On one side, you've got the world's way. This is where everyone's their own boss, their own standard, and the speech says, hey, that's just going to lead to fighting. It's inevitable. But then there's the principled way. This is all about having one single unifying standard, and it's not centered on I or me. It's about centering on a higher purpose, on God's will, and putting your own self second. And, the stakes here were presented as incredibly high. We're talking apocalyptic. This wasn't just some friendly suggestion for, living a better life. It was framed as the only way to stop the entire nation from collapsing. The message was crystal clear. Get on board with this one standard or everything is doomed.
So the big question is, how do you even get to this level of seriousness? Well, the speech is pretty clear that it's not about just, believing in it. It's something you have to achieve through a life of just relentless, super intensive training.
Yeah, the philosophy here is really direct. There are absolutely no shortcuts. This kind of seriousness, it's not something you're just given. It's something that's forged through constant personal effort. It's a totally hands-on process of, you guessed it, relentless self-discipline.
Then the speech lays out a very specific blueprint, and it actually uses his own life as the model. You can see it here in the timeline. It's broken down into these really distinct phases. First, there's a preparation period that goes up to age 33. Then you've got the practicing period up to 45. And finally, the accomplishment period. So yeah, this was definitely not a short-term goal. It was a structured, lifelong commitment.
And this training, it was meant to be completely all-consuming. Literally, every moment was a potential training ground. The speech gets into some really extreme practices, like training yourself to sleep sitting up, or cutting your sleep down to just 2 or 3 hours a night, and all while keeping yourself in peak physical shape just to be able to handle the strain of it all.
Okay, so all this intense training, it leads to what is probably one of the most counterintuitive ideas in the whole speech, and that's the belief that hardship, it's not something you should avoid. It's actually something you should actively go out and look for. Think about that question. Why not look for trouble? It goes against everything we naturally want, right? Our instinct is to find comfort and safety, but this philosophy says no. Instead of running away from difficulty, you should be running towards it. It completely reframes trouble as, like, a fundamental part of the journey. And this is where the whole idea of hardship gets completely redefined. It's not a punishment. It's not a sign you're failing. Instead, it becomes a symbol. It's like a necessary signal that, hey, goodness and success, they're waiting for you right on the other side of this struggle.
So what this does is it creates this direct link. The more hardship you face, the more happiness you can expect to feel later. Suffering isn't just something you have to grit your teeth and get through. It actually builds value. It makes the success you eventually find feel so much more real, so much more profound, precisely because of the struggle that came before it. But this whole mindset of embracing hardship, it wasn't just some abstract idea, It had to be practiced for real. It had to be applied with that same intense seriousness to every single one of your physical senses and every little thing you do during the day. The speech really pushed the audience to question themselves, to think about the intention behind even their most basic actions, like, are you just passively seeing things, or are your eyes looking with purpose? Are you just hearing sounds, or are you listening with your entire being? The idea was that every one of your senses had to become a tool for seriously engaging with the world. And to make this idea really concrete, the speech gives this pretty startling example of the discipline in action. We're talking about eating a meal in just 3 minutes.
And it's not about just rushing through it to get it over with. No, it's presented as an act of extreme focus and purpose, even in something as mundane as eating. So what was the goal of all this sensory training? Well, it was to develop this deep, almost instantaneous kind of perception. The ability to just look at any person or any object, even something as simple as a water fountain, and immediately understand its core structure, its harmony, and how it relates to everything else around it. So what's the end game here? What's the ultimate purpose of all this stuff? You know, the single standard, the crazy intense training, chasing after hardship, the sensory focus. Well, according to the speech, all of these threads, they all come together and point to one ultimate mission.
The speech lays out this really clear, logical path. It all starts with you, the individual. The idea is, by achieving this total seriousness in your own personal life, you will naturally start to align with God's overall plan. And that alignment, well, that's what elevates you to the position of a savior, someone who can actually rescue their nation and the world.
And ultimately, this whole seriousness thing, it's not just about personal enlightenment. It's actually framed as a kind of cosmic competition. The core message for that audience back in 1973 was this: the person or the group that is more serious than anyone else, that's who will earn the right and the power to save this nation. And that brings us to the final, really challenging question the source material leaves us with. After laying out this entire intense philosophy, the speech just turns it all right back around on the individual. It becomes a call to look in the mirror, you know? It forces you to make a choice. Is your life centered on you, or is it centered on a purpose that's far, far greater?